this looks like junk.
Yep, this is a junk deck.
Not to denigrate the deck. No, that is an archetype name for those of you who have not been around as much.
Right. This deck is running 4 skin renders, among other things. There's Brian on the right there playing green, white, black Birthing Pod, although he is only running 1 Birthing Pod. He is running 2 Garruk Relentless, which acts as a survival of the fittest sometimes, where he can search his library for the creature of his choosing using Garruk the Veil Cursed's second ability, often sacrificing a Death Touch Wolf or something similar. Max on the left there, I've been sort of eyeing him every once in a while, seeing what he's got. He's got these Ajanis, and they are pretty good with him. Like, I've been surprised all day.
So I think maybe some of this excitement that we're seeing in this room is perhaps a lot of Canadian power coming across Niagara Falls, trying to show us what Toronto's got.
That's right.
This is basically an event that is as close to Toronto as we can get without crossing over that line.
That's exactly right. We're an hour away from Toronto because we're in Buffalo. And we're going to get right in with the action. Brian starts off with Bird of Paradise off of Razor Verge Thicket.
Okay, Bird v. Bird. This is a mirror opener. Now, Brian Daviduk has a lot more ways to interact with his opponent, though, when it comes to the creatures, than Maxwell Brown has. Now, a lot of people called a certain kind of green-white aggro deck junk somewhere in the early 2000s, but really what junk was about is being a mid-range aggro deck that also could interact with the opponent. And Max Brown's deck, other than 2 Dismembers, is basically a racehorse. It's just trying to drop down stuff fast, have all of those things hit hard. This is a green-white aggro deck, straight up 4 Rancors, and then its top end basically stops at looks like Hero of Bladehold and Restoration Angel.
That's the top end of the deck. Yeah, this is. I mean, it's got the Blade Splicer Restoration Angel package happening, so
compare
very
that
strong.
To the other side of the world with a lot more mana acceleration and Grave Titan amongst other things.
I saw him. He was on camera for a little while, and he dropped a turn 4 Grave Titan, and then a turn 5 Vault of the Archangel, and went up to something like 45 before that game ended.
Right. Now we see Max Brown, Blade Splicer, and the Golem Friend facing off against a Viridian Emissary and some mana. A little bit of a stumble here, I think, from Daviduk just on this one turn. The land hurting him a little bit, stopping him from a 4-mana play.
Yeah, I see that.
And 3 mana, what are we going to have?
4 mana.
Only 3. Birthing Pod. The one Birthing Pod in the deck has been dropped down.
There it is.
Now, if Max Brown attacks, that Emissary is going to be able to essentially bring Daviduk up to a potential 6 mana next turn.
That's right.
And can Max Brown not attack? I think he has to. I think he has to keep it going.
I would think so. I mean, it's his job to attack. You see it right in the type line there. It's green-white aggro.
Here they come.
He's got to be aggressive.
I expect that this is not going to be a chump, but instead it's going to be a kill on one of those top creatures, either a Geist or a Blade Splicer.
Yep.
And which
I would
one
imagine
is
it's going to be the Blade Splicer to take away Restoration Angel shenanigans. So Brian Daviduk's going to take 5. He does only have 1 Birthing Pod in the deck. He also only has 1 Grave Titan in the deck. So accelerating him up to 6, not really terribly scary. A lot of his 5s, like Wolfer Silverheart, Geist Honored Monk, he already had access to, should he untap with only the lands he had.
And we're going to see Thalia join Max Brown's side of the table.
Yep, second main, Thalia. Not very good against, I shouldn't say that. Not as good as it can be against Brian Daviduk's deck. He's mostly creatures. One of his 8 non-creature spells is already on the board.
And draw.
I would anticipate Thalia's coming out, as a matter of fact, after this game is over.
Absolutely. I mean, Thalia against any deck with Birthing Pod, he does not know that Brian only has 1 Birthing Pod.
That's right.
Thalia, not a great card against Birthing Pod decks.
Sure. And he knows that, having seen the Birthing Pod, of course he knows that he's a Birthing Pod deck, but...
Skin Render, maybe?
There
Boom.
it is.
Skin Render. Rends the skin of...
Possibly
Thalia.
of Thalia.
And then I think the Skin Render is going to turn into something.
It sure is. I was going to say, Skin Render taking out a Golem doesn't really it doesn't really fly with me flavor-wise.
Are we gonna
Golems don't really have skin.
At 5, it could be a acidic slime.
This could be acidic slime. This could also be Geist Honored Monk. Acidic
Slime on the
golem
golem
token.
Golem,
Nice.
golem.
And Max puts his golem in the graveyard. Technically, it does touch the graveyard for just a second for purposes of enters the or goes into the graveyard effects or leaves play abilities, but then it promptly vaporizes and disappears.
We see 2 more mana.
There's some more Strangleroot Geists.
And now Brian has an interesting question to ask himself. Does he get rid of this 5 casting cost creature or not? I might just take the damage to get the Grave Titan.
I absolutely think taking the damage here is the way to go.
Look at this. He's thinking about it.
He's thinking about it. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is, Maxwell has a really aggressive deck. He doesn't know it yet, but a Johnny Caller of the Pride and Silverblade Paladin both make appearances, and that could actually just take out Brian's life total in one swing.
Another Blade Splicer. Wow.
Yeah, I think I would have let the damage through, because he would be at 9 now and be able to go get Grave Titan, which would put 3 more warm bodies on the field. Also would have theoretically allowed him to activate the Vault of the Archangel with the Grave Titan on the field.
We see 4 mana. Angel, main face.
I would doubt it.
Metamorph.
Much better.
Getting the blades.
Getting
copying
a
copying the
Strangleroot
Geist.
Geist.
And then it's going to be
Potting it
sacrificed,
away.
turning it into a Blade Splicer, I think.
Probably.
And getting a 3. Because remember, even though the Metamorph is a 4 casting cost creature, it is copying a 2. And so for the purposes of Birthing Pod, it remembers what it was.
So now he's searching his library, possibly for another Blade Splicer, actually. That looks like the likely, yep,
Yeah,
there it
look
is.
at that.
And so just an
The
army in a
table looks
can.
stable now.
Yep. And now, it looks stable, but Max has 3 of Johnny's, and those grant flying and double strike. So we're not out of the woods yet if we're Brian Daviduk. Johnny Caller of the Pride is very, it needs its day in the sun, and it hasn't found its home yet. And perhaps Max's deck is that place.
What records do these players have?
I believe these are both X and 1s. They might be Exos.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan in the booth with Ruben Bressler, and this is the 7th round of 9 rounds here at the Star City Games Live Open Series in Buffalo, New York.
And we're on Max's turn. He's just untapped after Brian Daviduk put a battalion on the field after playing Phyrexian Metamorph as a Strangleroot Geist, sacrificing it to Birthing Pod, getting it back as a Blade Splicer, and getting a Blade Splicer of his own. So that was quite the amount of power put on the board, and the only thing that Max can muster this turn is an Avacyn's Pilgrim.
Yep. Now, Brian Daviduk, he is not playing a strict pod list, only 1 pod in his deck, but the nature of what his deck looks like is reminiscent of Naya Pod, of Rug Pod, and in this kind of matchup, I have to think that unless Max Brown does something awesome like a Johnny, I think that Brian overall has the advantage in the matchup. Just able to go a little bit bigger and a little bit more suppressing than the other deck might be able to handle.
That's often been the case with Birthing Pod decks. For example, when a Naya Pod deck plays against a Naya aggro deck, it's sort of back and forth. Both players have Blade Splicers. It's just so, both players have Huntmaster of the Fells, for example, and the Naya aggro player just has a few more aggressive elements, maybe a couple more Geist Honored Monks or something like that, whereas the Naya Pod deck can go up to Inferno Titan and Elesh Norn and take over a game that way. And so I think that in the matchup of pod deck versus pod or non-pod deck of the same color, it makes sense to me that it would go the other way.
Wow! And Brian Daviduk searches up a Restoration Angel, gets flips the Metamorph back into a Blade Splicer for yet another Golem.
Yeah, geez, he's amassing quite the ground pound here. The only thing that really matters, I think, though, is that he has a Restoration Angel and that thing is flying. It's possible that he can just untap and swing out with the Vault of the Archangel activation, because that'll put him well out of range of death.
Yeah, right now, by having that flyer, I think he is now immune to the Ajani possible kill that Max had as a potential opening.
Right. Max could have theoretically played Rancor into Johnny on one guy and gotten in for, I believe that would have been lethal damage. Let me see here.
Very close.
3, 4, 5, 10. Yeah, it wouldn't have been lethal, but it would have been very close. Max drawing just, a Rancor.
There's a Rancor. So in for 5.
5 first strike.
Well, thankfully for Brian, he has a first striker of his own.
That's true.
I have to imagine that because that's not a real token, it's easier to decide to sacrifice it for the cause. If it was and Max says gaining life, never mind, I'm done.
Yep. And so Brian Daviduk is going to take game 1.
And one interesting thing is that Brian Daviduk has only 1 birthing pod, 2 mortar pods, and a metamorph. But there's no way for Max to know that.
Right.
Max has no reason to know that unless he's been watching. So I'm gonna wait a second. It's hard to talk over.
We have an announcement of somebody who needs a jump.
There's actually a lot of famous players here. There's Michael Jackson. There's Dan Brown. This is less famous for some people. Joe Wilson.
Sure.
But in any case,
Senator Joe Wilson.
Then going back to Brian here, I think it's very easy, unless Max knows Brian or has watched Brian, for him to characterize what Brian's deck does.
Yes.
Because Brian's deck, it has black removal, you know? And I expect we're going to see more black removal come in from the sideboard. I wouldn't be surprised by seeing 1 Sever the Bloodline, 3 Tragic Slips come in, and have a Thragtusk come in to help out. And then on the other side of the world...
On the other side, we've got Active Aggression.
That's a very powerful card.
It could be a very powerful card. Although he has not seen the Grave Titan or the Wolfer Silverhearts that are in Brian's deck. But he does have Thragtusks. I would expect Thragtusks to make an appearance. Possibly Celestial Purge. But almost certainly these Sword of Feast and Famine and these 2 Mirren Crusaders are both going to come in. Although the Mirren Crusader is not going to be as effective as Max might think, because if Max puts Brian on being a Birthing Pod deck and not having quite so much black elimination, I think that it would be very easy for the white part of the deck to hold off a Mirren Crusader long enough for the black elimination to literally take over the rest of the game, and just leave the 2/2 double striker to its own devices.
I mean, I don't think that I'm sorry. I don't. We're hearing the head judge there. Hard to hear myself there. I don't think we could fault Max Brown if he mis-sideboarded here.
Absolutely.
And not saying anything negative about Max, more just that his opponent, Brian Daviduk, not only is playing a deck that's off the radar, but also showed elements of a deck that
he's not
exactly
even playing.
What his deck is.
Here's the other thing about Maxwell's sideboard. He has Active Aggression, Crushing Vines, Thragtusk, Gut Shot, Sword of Feast and Famine, Mirren Crusader, and Celestial Purge. I think that he could make an argument to bring in literally all of those cards in different situations in this matchup.
I mean, let's pretend that you had a magic way of sideboarding where every once in a while you were allowed to draw the card of your choice from your sideboard.
Yep.
All of those cards would have a reason to be drawn.
Absolutely.
Literally every single one of the 15 cards in his sideboard would have a reason to be drawn.
Yep.
Now, I wouldn't have suggested to him, though, hey,
side
jam
in all these
15.
cards. Yeah. Well, he's certainly taking out Thalia. And so there's 4 that open up. Perhaps these Silverblade Paladins are a little small compared to Skin Renders that he saw in Game 1 and other black elimination he could theoretically put them on. So there's 6 that he could take out. But beyond that, there's not a lot you're going to be able to take out of Maxwell's main deck.
I mean, if you sideboard too much, you cease to be the deck you want to be.
Right.
I mean, one of the things I remember really importantly from, I want to say, Pro Tour Kobe, that Affinity Pro Tour, essentially.
Right.
Affinity Pro Tour is that a lot of people had a ton of sideboard cards that they brought in for the Affinity Mirror. And then they would be like, I don't understand. I keep
Right.
losing the mirror. I keep losing the mirror. Well, why? They ceased to be an affinity deck.
That's exactly
They
right.
brought in so much stuff, they ceased to be a deck. Now, if you're going to do a transformational sideboard, you have to be able to successfully transform. I mean, let's pretend that you partially transform into something.
Yeah.
It's just not very impressive.
Exactly. Well, I think that it's a symptom of a lot of players to not play enough sideboarded games. I think a lot of players play a lot of game 1s and not a lot of game 2 and 3s. I'm not saying that's the case here. Both of these players appear to be very confident and competent with their respective decks. I'm just saying that it is a symptom, and so he might be prone to over sideboarding. It's possible. I'm not saying that it's probable.
I would certainly, I have no idea how either of these players play. I do think that there is a general trend in Magic players that if they don't play enough game 2s and 3s, that's a problem.
Yep.
Okay, turn 1, both players lay lands.
No
nothing
mana
else.
guys for either player.
Turn 2, Max Brown. Geist and
Strangler
on
Geist
in.
for 2.
The Geist, very effective early, but will quickly get outclassed by Brian.
Yeah, I don't think Geist actually shines very much in this matchup.
You know what? I think Viridian Emissary shines a lot more than the Geist does.
I completely agree with that. And so being slightly more controlling definitely favors Brian. Brian drawing his cards in the wrong order this game.
Turn 2, Bird of Paradise. And we have
Ooh, double striking
that is hot.
Strangleroot Geist with
Yikes.
Silverblade Paladin.
And they are best friends for at least as long as they live.
They've made a relationship.
You know,
What was that story? Was that the Channel Fireball guys were preparing for the Pro Tour, and they were testing with one of the Japanese players, and the translation of Soulbond into Japanese is very similar to that of Get Married. And so he would, whenever he played something with it, he would be like, make relationship, at which point everyone else on the team decided to do the same thing. So Max Brown attacking with his double strikers, but we have a Restoration Angel coming in.
and will he be allowed to block? If so, goodbye Paladin. The Paladin will,
Still
on the
take
converse,
down.
kill out the Angel.
And
that seems
still
so
deal
strange,
4.
though, an Angel killing a Paladin and vice versa.
Well, you know, strange days.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. These are hard times we have, and sometimes a paladin and an angel have to do things that they might not otherwise do.
What do we have? Dismember.
Luckily, we have Dismember
Very timely
to avoid
Dismember.
to avoid the political strife.
Thank God the Angel only had one of its limbs torn off.
That's right. Very distracted though, so it decided to go to the graveyard instead of trying to stick around and block with only one arm.
Well, I mean,
so this is 8 damage coming in for Max. Going to send Brian to 6.
It's a fair amount, and he's still not done.
And he's not done yet. There's a Bird of Paradise. So that's one of the things that bothers me about green-white aggro as a deck in general, is that if you can deal with the first wave of threats, then there's another wave of threats often. But if you deal with 2 waves of threats, then it just happens to be like, here's a bird, go. Here's an Avacyn's Pilgrim, go. Notwithstanding a sword or a Gavany Township, which certainly changes the equation.
Well, I mean, if you look at traditional successful decks in this color combination, they often have some other plan of attack.
Yes.
And here, do we have the kill? This could be the kill.
This is a 4/1 double striking Strangleroot Geist. If Brian's going to need one of his instant speed elimination spells, I saw Crushing Vines.
I saw one too. Wow. Crushing Vines against this green-white aggro deck. It does take down a Johnny flown creature. If you say to the air, Crushing Vines can take it down.
That's true. It does, well, he doesn't know that he has a Johnny. What he's seen is Restoration Angel. What he's probably assuming is swords of some kind.
That's reasonable.
And a Johnny's not on his radar, but it will work. And that's going to pack it up. That's plenty of damage caused by a trampling Strangleroot Geist.
Swords is a totally reasonable thing to see. And the thing about it is that swords is that other angle we were talking about, you know? Where you'd be like, oh, all I've got is this bird plus a sword.
Right. I mean, well, if you think about it, what's the last time? I can't think of a time in any format in which in which you would describe a deck as like completely aggro that ran 4 Birds of Paradise, right? Because green, like for example, green-red aggro is as close to all out as you can get. You can literally build that deck with all either mana animals and haste creatures. Like you can build the entire thing to not even have to deal with Day of Judgment. really. I mean, until later, but you still get some value out of your guys. And that deck's running 4 Birds of Paradise.
Well, I mean, I think the last time we saw that very commonly was, and I know it has existed since, but just not on as high on the radar. The last time was the so-called Frog in a Blender deck.
Oh, sure.
From Odyssey Block Standard in 2002.
Right.
I preferred to call that like green-red heat.
Yeah,
or just green-red aggro. But Frog in a Blender was what a lot of people
Why
called
was that deck called Frog in a Blender? It was
if
the
I
art
remember
on one
correctly,
of the cards.
it was the art on one of the cards, and plus that you would be using Reckless Charge on your cards, and sometimes that would just, you'd like put them in and put this red card on them.
Yeah.
So the green card, you'd put the red card on them.
Sure. Okay.
And then
previous to that, the only time that I can think of was back when Rancor was in Standard, because you could make a 2/1 flying guy, and that was often just good enough.
And Rancor is back.
And Rancor is back, so it's not surprising that green, white, and green, red aggro are running Birds of Paradise. They're also running many more mana guys. I think one of the biggest segments of the metagame right now is decks that go turn 1 mana thing, turn 3 3-drop, are extremely hampered when they don't have that 1-drop. They're slowed down by 1, maybe 2 turns. Well, and that goes for all of those decks, and it's that's why Delver was so good against those decks for a long time, was because they were running multiple gut shots.
Were you in Vegas at all?
I was not in Vegas.
I was going to ask you about if you saw that happening in Vegas, because I know we saw that 2 weeks ago.
Saw what?
The
one
gut shots,
yeah.
taking down a lot of the ones.
Well, the format's shifted a lot in the last 2 weeks to now being pretty much hitting a real sweet spot of 3 decks. Now, for some reason, I haven't seen as much zombies this weekend, but the 3 cards that were sort of doing the rock, paper, scissors dance were Delver of Secrets / Snapcaster Mage, Bonfire of the Damned, and Blood Artist. But we haven't really seen any Blood Artists.
Well, one of the things that Patrick and I were talking about earlier is that it's very possible that black-based aggro has just been overshadowed by green-based aggro now that Rancor exists.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Although I would like to see some zombies decks get Rancor in the mix, because the Birthing Pod zombies decks were picking up in popularity, and there's no reason, I don't think, to not make a 4/1 Gravecrawler or put one on a Geralf's Messenger or something like that, if you can afford the mana.
The hardest part about it is the Messenger plus Rancor is just hard
very
to put in the
difficult
same deck.
on your mana.
I mean, if we think about one of the decks that I really, really, really wanted to work with, was something Aaron Forsyth joked about on Twitter once, where Aaron Forsyth, and you can follow Aaron Forsyth, one of the Magic R&D head gurus, at MTG Aaron.
Yep.
Aaron Forsyth tweeted, Obliterator, Prey Upon, seems good.
Yeah. No, there were some people at my local comic book shop before I moved to Roanoke that were trying to make that work, but the problem is that you've only got Woodland Cemetery. There's no City of Brass. There's no Gemstone Mine. This is not Time Spiral block constructed. We don't have, or this is not Lorwyn block constructed, where we've got all the Vivids and Reflecting Pools.
Right.
So
this is not Return to Ravnica constructed. Ooh.
Foreshadowing. But the mana just isn't good enough.
Spoilers.
I mean, this was also one of the main complaints at the Avacyn Restored Pro Tour, was that the mana just isn't good enough to be able to reliably do anything.
You know what makes me kind of sad?
What's
is that nowadays, since we don't have Stone Rain anymore, we have to rely on really crappy land destruction.
Yeah.
You can't just stick the knife in even more when the mana is bad.
Right,
I love
right.
that. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I forget who said it first, but I know Evan Irwin has reiterated that Stone Rain as a spell would be perfectly costed at 3.5 mana.
And in play, we've got Strangleroot Geist facing off against a Blade Splicer.
And the Golem comes in for an attack on Brian Daviduk's side. He has not played his 3rd land yet. So Max will block, turn his guy into a 3/2. Playing another Blade Splicer. Oh, jeez.
Now, one of the things that a lot of players said just a few weeks ago is, Blade Splicer, man, that's a card I can't beat.
Yep. And there's hey, you know
Max
what?
Brown can join him.
Yep. 2's company, 3's a crowd, and now we've got 8 guys on the board, and it's turn 3. Standard is very cluttered board states with lots of creatures that make other creatures, like Blade Splicer and Huntmaster of the Fells, Geist Honored Monk. And so the trump card is often flying creatures, and that's why Restoration Angel has become such a popular thing. Also, on top of that trump card, Bonfire of the Damned. I'm not sure how much Bonfire of the Damned you've gotten a chance to watch today, but of course, whenever ground stalls are a problem, the parity breaker tends to be Bonfire.
Sadly, very little.
So a Tragic Slip is going to take care of one of the Golem tokens that was blocking one of Brian's Golem tokens, making it a 2/2. The Blade Splicer is staying alive. No, it's getting Tragic Slipped. I see. So the Blade Splicer got Tragic Slipped, so the Golem would lose first strike. And they're checking to see if it's all Golems have first strike or all Golems you control have first strike. It appears to be that it's just you control, as is the case with most things these days. And so the Blade Splicer left Max's side of the board. Brian's retained first strike, so after blocks, both of Max's creatures died.
What a just amazing little bit of a trap there. This is the strength of the black removal that you can see in an actual junk deck, as opposed to if this was just a Birthing Pod deck, which often does not have any instant tricks.
Yep, and just a little bit of a slip is all Brian needed. And so Max is going to rumble in with his Strangleroot Geist attacking. This is the most telegraphed Restoration Angel I think I've ever seen. I bet this Cavern of Souls named Angel, then he attacked with Strangleroot Geist. I'm not sure Brian would put him on anything. Oh, it named Human. Okay, well, oh, jeez. Well, that's a giant
Shiny.
wolf. That's a giant wolf or Silverheart being paired with Blade Splicer, making it a 5/5. So we have a 5/5 Blade Splicer and two 3/3 first striking Golem tokens. Here's a Restoration Angel coming in from Max, blinking the Strangleroot Geist. Strangleroot Geist will stand in front of the now much larger Blade Splicer. The Restoration Angel will take care of a Golem, and Max will drop down to 14. But Brian paid 5 mana and got 12 power on the board, and I'm not sure Max can answer that reliably.
Okay. Wow. So
now,
go ahead.
I was going to say, one interesting thing is if he did bring in the active aggressions and he gains control of the Wolf or Silverheart, that will break the soul bond because it changed control of creatures, and you can't have soul bonded pairs opposite sides of the board.
Are you saying that people that are best friends can't fight on other sides of the war?
That's correct.
Oh man.
It would just break it. It would break them apart.
Brother
is what
versus
I'm saying.
brother. Split asunder.
Yep. This is dangerous times we live in.
And
sometimes.
Rancor and a magic card off the top or off the side of the library.
Off to the bottom of your
can't
screen
see
there.
What it is. I'm not sure, but
it might be an Ajani because it appeared as if he tapped 3 and gave flying and double strike to the Strangleroot Geist. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10.
Ouch.
So if Max can survive the swing, well, he can't activate the Ajani again. So that's one thing. So Max is threatening lethal.
Aziz Elduri comes into the room. To the air, he says. And unfortunately, not enough to kill him, but a very good start.
There it is. There's a Johnny Caller of the Pride. Severing the bloodline.
Ouch.
And this is going to be lethal damage for Brian coming in against Max.
Unless there's
something in Max's deck that will be able to...
Dismember, does that do enough?
Dismember
really.
on... Well, no, he takes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yes, he will go to 2.
Wait a second, though. Wait.
Because Wolfer Silverheart's now a 4-drop.
I think that's...
4, 5, 6, 7, 8...
It's too late for me to do the... I wanted to do the math, but... what was the result of that match, you ask? It depends on what that math worked out to.
Yep, it looks like 2-1 for Max is what just happened. Is it 2-1 for Brian or 2-1 for Max? Looks like Max is the winner, is what that says. So Okay, so yeah, what happened that I said what happened. So he dismembered the 5/5 Blade Splicer, making the Wolf for Silver a 4/4. He took 4 from that, 3 from the Blade Splicer, 1 from the Blade Splicer, and 3 from the Golem, taking 9 damage, dropping him to 5. And then on the swing back, it was lethal damage because he could put a +1/+1 counter on the Strangleroot Geist.
Yep.
Attack with the Strangleroot Geist. There was a 4/3 that had a Rancor on it with an additional +1/+1 counter.
You know,
For exact seats.
Brian was actually too aggressive there.
Yes, he was.
Brian could have held something back, and there was not enough counters on a Johnny to be able to go to the air.
That's right.
And not enough to actually kill Brian. He would have been dropped down very low.
I think that Brian probably could have kept at least a guy back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was a little bit of a mistake, but you know, the only way that's a mistake is if Max has one of his 2 dismembers, and it's not like he was telegraphing.
He does not know, though. I mean, he does not know how many dismembers Max has. He just knows that every game Max has cast a dismember.
That's fair. But that seems to be the only thing in his deck that could have possibly been the out there, is my point.
I hear you.
So,
I guess I feel like this, though, right? If you've got the kill anyway, if he doesn't have the dismember, then just put that much forth.
Absolutely. He was attacking with lethal damage.
Yeah, I mean,
but he could have still been attacking with lethal damage and leave back the 1/1 Blade Splicer.